Hello and welcome to Behind the Scenes, a podcast where we talk about the intersection of art, culture, and big ideas. I'm your host, Sean Malone, the creative director for the Foundation for Economic Education and creator of Out of Frame, a video essay series on YouTube. Today, it's a little trimmed down with Paul out, but Jen Maffisanti, who's the director of communications for the Libertas Institute in Utah, is with us this week. How are you doing, Jen?
I have a cold. I have a spring cold, and you should feel sorry for me.
I mean, I guess I should. I'm not entirely sure that I do. I don't have a cold. I'm like just barely hanging on though, and I'm pretty sure just as my body works, like the ridiculous amount of stress that I'm enduring, like trying to get everything done, go through the move, all that kind of stuff. I'm fairly confident that I will fly to Los Angeles in about a week. And then I will almost certainly, either when I get there or get back, be horribly sick because I will have moved by that point and I will have done the Los Angeles trip.
Yeah.
And then my body will be like, given up.
Well,
completely, it's time.
When I join you in Los Angeles next week,
yeah, you'll just give it to me. Whatever you have, you'll just pass my way. Yeah. Oh boy. But yeah, hopefully you feel better by then. It's not fun.
I should. This seems like a pretty short run thing. My husband got it first and he's already pretty much recovered, and he started feeling bad on like Thursday night of last week. Okay. So like this should not be a huge deal.
Man. Yeah. No, I like not that anybody cares necessarily, but like this LA trip is going to be fun. I think in a lot of ways. Well, first of all, I haven't been to Los Angeles since like right before the troubles, so to speak. Literally right before. I was in LA for a movie premiere actually in like February or like January or February. And then it was like January. And then all the stuff happened, and in 2020, and then I haven't been since. So that should be good. I just kind of wish it wasn't happening like literally right after I have to move. It's happening like actually not even before we're officially out of our current house. So.
Well, that was very inconsiderate of the program organizers to not consult you on these sorts of things.
I thoroughly agree.
Just the audacity.
But it'll be fun.
It'll be fun.
We'll do the things. But anyway, today we've set out to talk about a movie that I'm actually kind of glad that you and I went to and not Paul, because I don't know. I feel like Paul would have hated this movie.
It's a coin flip for Paul, I think.
It is kind of a coin flip. He could have liked this, but I kind of feel like he would have hated it, and he would have rained on our parade the whole time. But we this week on Behind the Scenes, we're talking about The Lost City, starring Sandra Bullock, Channing Tatum, Brad Pitt. Sort of starring Brad Pitt with I'll call it an extended cameo from Brad Pitt. Let's call it
special guest appearance by
special guest appearance by Brad Pitt. Although he was in all of their marketing, and then of course Daniel Radcliffe as as a very strange villain. I think.
Yes,
but this movie, I guess I could describe it like. I mean, and I'm sure other people have probably described it this way, but it reminds me a lot of Romancing the Stone or Jewel of the Nile, and sort of really like classic romantic comedies Romancing the Stone is such an obvious one because like Romancing the Stone is literally about a novelist who gets sort of wrapped into this like bigger grand adventure that she's utterly unprepared for. And it's basically the same movie in that context, right? But it's a genre that we haven't seen in a long time, I feel like. So this just feels like something out of, the late 80s or at most recent, maybe like mid 2000s, and I enjoyed it. And like, I just really, I thought it was funny, and I thought like, and it was funny in a way that was a little bit edgier even than a lot of those movies, and certainly than like Romancing the Stone, which I think was trying to be a little bit more of an adventure movie. I mean, this was a good time for me. I don't know. What were your sort of initial thoughts?
This movie, what I am very squarely located in this movie's target audience. Like, I double checked to make sure that this movie was not made by some friends of mine who are like, Jim would like a movie, and then they just didn't tell me that they made a movie for me. This is exactly what I wanted. This was so much fun. It really leaned into the comedy part of the romantic comedy, and it was action adventure-y enough that it's a fun romp, and it's really tightly plotted. And it's just
that's something
so
I
much
miss.
fun.
That's something I miss, by the way. I've thought about that a lot, especially going back and revisiting movies from the 80s and 90s in particular. Like how tight the screenplays actually are. It's just something you don't see a lot now. Like quite a lot of the time, you'll end up 45 minutes into a film before anything really happens that advances the story. And like, if you go back to watching a movie like Ghostbusters, for example, like Ghostbusters, literally in about 2 minutes, you have seen a ghost and you have met your central protagonist. Like it takes almost no time whatsoever. And then by like 5-6 minutes into that film, like Venkman is booted from the university and has an idea. I mean, I might be exaggerating a tiny bit, but it is not, I mean, it's literally by 10 minutes, Venkman has started the Ghostbusters business. Like it's on, right?
Yeah.
And you don't see that a lot now. Like so often, even in comedies, maybe especially in comedies, because comedies today are so often not scripted anymore, or at least, they're sort of loosely scripted. And then it's so much about improv and doing like these long extended scenes of kind of like this kind of wide angle, like we're going to do single camera and we're just going to like hold it on a group of people, just like kind of messing around for 10 minutes. And hopefully we cut something out of that that's useful. The problem, of course, with that is that you can't get anything that's tight, right? Like everything has to be, so loose that it eventually like you end up 20, 30 minutes into the story and like nothing's really happened. It's just people riffing for like that whole time. This was clearly scripted comedy. And also like, I'm sure there's little bits of improv in here as well. I would love to see the outtakes of Channing Tatum in a handful of these scenes, particularly. But the other thing that this brought back for me is something that I also personally love, which is Sandra Bullock as a comic actress, because she is so good. I mean, she is very good across the board, but like, I mean, I feel like maybe I'm exaggerating, but like, was the last comedy that she did The Heat? Maybe. Oh, I guess no. Let me see. As an actress, I'm trying to think, because she did, Our Brand is Crisis and Bird Box and The Unforgivable, and I'm pretty sure, and Gravity, right? She did Gravity in 2013. So The Heat in 2013, I think, was probably the last comedy that she was in. This is nearly 10 years ago.
Yeah. So I loved her in this role. It was very reminiscent of her, just from the vibe, the tone of it, from Miss Congeniality,
Yeah.
And which was
and the jumpsuit, for that matter.
Again, 100% my jam. So it was just a delight to see her in this kind of role again. And Channing Tatum is such an excellent comedic actor.
Yeah.
And, who doesn't want to watch two ridiculously attractive people be funny at each other for an hour and 45 minutes?
Yeah. I mean, So, so the film, I'll go through the plot real quick. The plot is pretty straightforward. It's not really the point of this movie, I would say, but like the plot is simple. We've got a woman who is a best-selling author of romance novels, you know, like adventure romance novels. Exactly the kind of story that is about to unfold, more or less, except for probably much less funny. Her novels don't seem like they're very funny, but she's also lonely. Her husband died. I don't know if they said specifically, but you know,
No.
a few years earlier, right? And she's been alone for 4 or 5 years, it seems like, and she's kind of over it. She doesn't really want to write anymore. She doesn't really leave the house. She's kind of not. She's kind of given up.
Doing well.
She's not doing well, right? And you know, her publicist sets up a book tour for her, and they go out and try to sell the book. It's not selling super well, probably in part because she kind of phoned in the ending, and it probably phoned in most of the whole book, to be honest. It kind of seems like took her a long time to finish it, all of that kind of stuff. Again, and this is a woman who she's just kind of lost her mojo across the board, right? And Channing Tatum, meanwhile, is the Fabio-like cover model for the book. And he gets invited to go to these, you know, to conventions and to all of the book signings and all that kind of stuff too, because of course he is in demand as somebody that all of the ladies who read these romance novels would like to meet him as well. So he kind of steals the show, and she kind of hates him, and she kind of feels like he doesn't even really totally understand that he's not that character. So he's kind of playing a version of the character Dash, who's the kind of the lead archaeologist, Indiana Jones type that she wrote into the book. But anyway, this all, you know, is a horrible disaster. But at the end of one of their conventions that goes wildly off the rails, Daniel Radcliffe essentially kidnaps her. Not essentially. He absolutely kidnaps her.
Straight up kidnaps her.
Straight up kidnaps her and invites her to participate in an archaeological dig to find the lost city of D, which is the name of the book. And in fact, is a real, I mean, not in real life, obviously, but in the context of the movie, it is an actual lost city that she kind of referenced and, you know, wove into the story. And the reason that he is interested in her is because her husband, her late husband, was an anthropologist, I think, or an archaeologist, and he was capable of translating
types. Like,
yes,
I think she studied history or something like that.
Yeah, I think they
go with him on digs and things like that. They apparently had a very lovely marriage. It sounded wonderful, but
yeah. And well, and again, I mean, she's very broken up about the fact that doesn't exist anymore, and that's totally understandable. Anyway, she's the only one left who can theoretically translate this language, and time is of the essence, as Harry Potter says, because there's the island is volcanic. The island that this city is on is volcanic. That's also why they were able to find the lost city in the first place, because it kind of emerged from the, you know, from being buried, basically. But there's a clock, and which is also something that I feel like a lot of stories are missing.
Yeah, we've got to have those time constraints.
And they've got to, you know, discover the ancient tomb of the, you know, the leader of the whatever. Like none of that actually matters, right? Like none of that stuff.
They got to find the MacGuffin before
before the island blows up. That's literally it. They got to find the MacGuffin before the island blows up. And so he kidnaps her, takes her to the island, and then, you know, Channing Tatum kind of sees her get kidnapped and then mounts a rescue, a very ill-advised for a dumb model to go mount a jungle rescue in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So that's basically the story. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, but there's just so many things about it that were for me. I mean, like, this is a family-friendly show, so there's only so much I can say about this. But let's just say the lost city of D is metaphorical.
Mm-hmm.
And that metaphor gets exploited a fair bit in the film.
Yep.
And if your comedy stylings include stuff that you would have found funny as a 13-year-old, and I can do that, then you'll probably find a lot of the movie to be pretty entertaining.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there's a lot of puns.
There are a lot of puns.
And
honestly,
they're
high quality.
They're high quality puns. And it's all like thematically consistent from her book through the whole thing. I mean, that's the other thing too, I would say about this movie that I actually particularly liked, even though it's pretty straightforward in a lot of ways. Like, and some of the metaphorical stuff is on the nose. I don't want to misconstrue this as like the smartest movie that you've ever seen. It's not. But if you set your expectations at like, Romancing the Stone, I think is a pretty good expectation, or like one of Sandra Bullock's romantic comedies, Miss Congeniality, right? Like, I think those are really good models for this. And if you like that kind of movie, I think you'll probably like this. I don't know. I had a good time. My wife and I laughed the whole way through. We were also in a theater with a group of teenagers who came in. I'm certain that they snuck in from some other movie. And like immediately did not get it and did not get what this movie was, or did not like it. Like they had no context for this kind of romantic comedy. There's just wildly the wrong audience, and then sort of heckled it for a little bit and then left, which I thought was funny.
Oh my goodness.
What are you going to do? But, I mean, look, I would have stuck in whatever at, when I was in high school, but like, it's probably not for a high school crowd. Probably not.
No, no, it is not. And, like, they even sort of state who their audience is. The social media manager is talking about where she's trying to target the author's demographic, which is people in their 30s who wish they were in their 20s. And right. That's kind of who this movie is for. There were an awful lot of things like that, which were just really, to me, they were just sort of sharp, which was like, I'm your new social media manager. We're targeting teens, but what that actually means is, people in their 30s who wish they were in their 20s. And it's like, yeah, that's probably accurate. That's like, accurate. It's not. And also like the publicist Nana, Yeah, absolutely. So good. But like, it's, it is simply a delightful, funny, charming movie all around. They clearly read Blake Snyder's Save the Cat. They hit every one of those beats. Sure did. Also, now I was thinking about this too, by the way. The film was, who was it written by? Sorry, I'm trying to remember what they'd done before that. Oh yeah, actually, directed by the guys who had directed, they do Pixels? I'm trying to like figure out like some of these things, like, no, not by the directors of Pixels. I don't know, actually, although now that I'm looking at it, the directors are doing a He-Man movie, interestingly enough. Well, then I might give it a shot. As long as it's not Kevin Smith doing a He-Man movie, I feel like I could give it a chance. But I don't remember. I think it was written or co-written by somebody who's involved in a couple previous comedies. Pixels wasn't that good. But I think a lot of Pixels' problem was more the idea of Pixels. There was nothing wrong with like the core idea of Pixels. It was like a lot of execution problems with Pixels, I would argue. But in any case, I don't know. I mean, I think we've said what we need to say as far as like what the movie is. But I think what I would want to talk about maybe a little bit with it is maybe more like there is kind of a melancholy heart under
some of it, which is more about like the way you experience loss and what you do with that afterwards. And I think that that's, while, you know, obviously like this is all set up to be pretty light and not take itself very seriously. Like, I do think that there are an awful lot of people out there who, you know, find that their life didn't quite go the way that they'd planned, and then kind of give up. And if you give up, like, especially if you give up so early, I mean, you know, you're talking about in the context of the movie, I don't know, a 40-something-year-old woman. I don't know how old Sandra Bullock is now, probably, you know, in her 50s. But like, even then, if you're giving up entirely because like some aspect of your life kind of went down a different way than you expected, like there's probably a lot of life left before you know, like that. This is kind of miserable to me. I don't know.
Yeah, there was a lot that it said about loss and disappointment and how we cope with that.
Yeah.
And Sandra Bullock's character, Loretta, had actually this sort of romanticized scenario built up in her head, which was kind of the central pivot that both her book and the narrative of the story sort of revolved around. And that was the story of this ancient king and his beloved queen. And when the king died, the queen just laid down in the tomb with him and just gave up. And like,
which
just
is like
buried herself with them.
It's like supposed to be romantic, right?
Yeah,
like,
and
except
that it's not.
It's not really.
And like, how might that kingdom have gone differently if she'd actually stepped up and like become the ruler after her husband passed away? Like, how
or
might her
done
life
something
anything other than just giving up and literally burying herself with him?
But and it's funny because so many of these things, like, again, the movie is like kind of on the nose with some of this kind of stuff, but they literally end up at the end of the movie because of nefarious Daniel Radcliffe, like being trapped in that tomb, laying down on top of these, you know, these skeletons, right? Like Channing Tatum and Sandra Bullock. And like she says something in that moment. She's like, "Oh, I thought this was going to be romantic, but this is actually not really. Like, this is kind of terrifying, right?" And it's like, yeah, this is not. That's like, you shouldn't just give up when you're. I don't know. It's really strange to me, but I kind of appreciate that about the movie. I mean, there are certain things, and maybe this can turn a little bit towards a conversation about like romantic comedy tropes over the years. And I think a lot of them, you know, kind of do damage to the way that people think about relationships and they think about life in general.
For sure.
And some of those tropes include things like this, where it's just like, oh, just like sacrifice yourself because the thing didn't go the way that you thought it was going to go.
Your one true love, TM, is gone, and so now your life is over.
Your life is completely ruined and it's useless, and you can never do anything from here on. And it's such a like a terrible way to think about the world. I mean, it's I think that's like the flip side of every bit as bad. I mean, it's not even really the flip side. It's basically the same. It's the through line of you only have one magical true love, right? That if you miss your chance when you'll
never get
19
it again.
years old, you'll never have another. Yeah, you will.
Yeah,
you will.
You'll be okay.
You will.
It'll
and
suck
honestly,
for a while,
like,
but you'll be okay.
When you have these notions that like there's this like sort of fated soulmate kind of thing where it's like this is the only possible thing you can have, like you end up actually kind of I feel like most people probably end up messing up their relationships as a result, because they're fantasizing, they're romanticizing, you know, for lack of kind of a better way to describe that, but they're romanticizing like the relationship without thinking about relationships as a human organic thing that takes work and time and effort, and it's not it's not fate, it's not magic, it's not any of those things. Like you have to continually be a decent human being to your partner and to treat people like partners, and you're just not going to get that gifted to you. It's not going to be like the gods and the universe just sort of supplies you with a perfect relationship that never has any problems, or you never ever have to deal with anything. Like, that's just not how it works.
No, it's not. Spoiler alert, young ones. Relationships are a lot of work.
Yeah.
And
that's, by the way, that's okay.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean your relationship is a bad one.
No.
All relationships require work.
No. And I think the thing that I learned when I was, and it probably took me way too long to sort of learn this too, but it was more me learning, if the people putting in the work, if that was really one-sided, the relationship is doomed. Like, there's no, it has to be a partnership. It actually has to be two people working together towards, common goals. It can't be one person trying, extremely hard and constantly sort of giving and giving and giving, and then finding, that the other person is just there to take. I mean, that's not a healthy relationship. And I was in many of those kinds of relationships for a long time, because I always thought that my job, and some of this came back from these kinds of romantic tropes in film, right? Some of these came from that, because it was always me going like, oh, the big romantic gesture, the Lloyd Dobler, boombox over the head, like all that kind of stuff was like what you're supposed to do, especially as a guy. Like, that's the stuff you're supposed to do. And then I kind of found out in my later, like mid to later 20s, that like, not only is that kind of a bad thing to do, it also like, it sets the tone for the relationship in a really bad way, because you end up with a relationship that is predicated on your like gifts and your effort, and like if you stop doing that, and it's unsustainable, right? Like, you can't just do that every day forever. Like, you can't do these big romantic gestures. You can't go buy somebody flowers every week. Like, you can't do that, and it's not going to sustain itself over time. And what happens then, of course, is that you stop doing that, and then the person loses interest, and then you feel like, oh my God, I've got to pick up my game again and like do it again. What I realized eventually was like, it's way better to actually just find somebody you connect with and that you enjoy being around all the time. Yeah. Not just when we're doing special things and going out to big dinners, and you can hang out with somebody on the couch. Like, that's better in a lot of ways.
That was definitely a lesson that I had to unlearn from the romantic comedy, just romance tropes in general, is that if you're not constantly in the throes of fiery passion, it's not a good relationship. And let me tell you, kids, that is 100% false, because
it's weird.
Most of the time, you're not going to be in the throes of fiery passion. You have life to live. You need to clean the kitchen. You need to go to work. You need to, I don't know, raise your kids. Like, you're going to be spending far more time fully dressed with each other than you're not. And so that is the part of the relationship that I think matters most.
Yeah, you just don't. It's funny because you just don't get that from these kinds of stories most of the time.
And I did actually really genuinely appreciate that, even though Sandra Bullock's character, Loretta, found Channing Tatum's character, Alan, physically attractive, she wasn't actually interested in him that way at all until she started to get to know him as a human person.
Yeah.
And not just the pretty cover model for her novels.
Similarly, I would say, so Alan, Channing Tatum's character, he really liked her.
Yeah.
But he really liked her. And it's funny, that was an interesting dynamic as well, because he knew stuff about her and he liked her for who she is in general. And it wasn't just, I mean, she's Sandra Bullock. She's very attractive. You can't escape
There's
that.
no getting around that. She's beautiful.
But his interest in her, similarly, I think, like, he was already interested in her because, unlike Sandra Bullock's character Loretta, he actually paid attention to her. Like, she just immediately prejudged him as an idiot, right? Like, she prejudged him as a dumb model who, you know, whatever. And she insults him repeatedly in pretty hurtful ways, honestly. Yeah. Like things like, you know, you were picked at random, basically. Like I just
requires more skills than just taking off your shirt, you know?
Right. Stuff like that. Yeah. Like, you can't solve this problem like just by taking off your shirt. And of course, he was like, well, not my shirt. There's little things like that. But the point is, for me, like, Alan actually, like, it wasn't your Cinderella, like, we met at the ball and then it's, you know, I saw her or I saw him like for 2 seconds and whoa, he's got a nice uniform, so good enough for me. We're, you know, cool. It was actually like Channing Tatum's character actually liked her and paid attention to her, like, too, when he rescued her. I mean, it's funny too, because a lot of this comes to a head when, so you see this in the trailers where Brad Pitt is the guy that Channing Tatum hires, who is a ex-Navy SEAL and just impossible superhero the whole time. And there's a trailer moment that, by the way, even my mother-in-law mentioned to me. She was like, have you seen the trailers for this Lost City? Said Brad Pitt comes in and Sandra Bullock asks him, how is he so handsome? And he's like, my dad was a weatherman. Perfect. But flawless. You know, Brad Pitt is Brad Pitt the embodiment of the character that she writes, right? Like, he's smart, he's like ludicrously handsome, he's, you know, he's highly insanely competent, right? Yeah. Like, he is, and this is the best version of this that I could possibly think of. He is a like clear, perfect example of what you'd call a Mary Sue kind of character, right? Like, he has zero flaws. He is written to have zero flaws, but that's intentional, right? Like, his existence is to be the guy with zero flaws, so that you can compare and contrast that to Channing Tatum, who has you know, especially in her eyes, a ton of flaws, right? Like, he is not that competent. He is not that smart. He is not, I mean, he's just not the guy that she wants. And of course, Brad Pitt would be the guy that she wants. Except, as I said, and I won't spoil anything, but he only has an extended cameo. So he cannot be the guy that she wants permanently. And I think that if they'd written that differently, I mean, we would have seen some other horrible flaw that would have gotten him out of the story at some point. But I mean, stuff like that is important. But it's also an important reminder that, like, that doesn't exist. Yeah. You know, like Brad Pitt's character in this movie can't exist in real life. Can't. No. So, I don't know. I mean, that's for me, like, little things like that, I just kind of enjoyed. It reminds me a little bit of, I guess, this is going to be a weird example, but Enchanted. Right? With Amy Adams, where it's like kind of taking on some of those tropes, but not in a way. I mean, it's sort of like it's using them while poking fun at them at the same time. There
is a very real sense of self-awareness with this movie. And to me, it feels like such a love letter to the romance genre of fiction. And it's just executed so well without taking itself too seriously. Because let's be real honest with ourselves here. The romance genre is a bit ridiculous. And I say that as a big romance novel reader. It's absurd. It is absolutely ridiculous. And just to fully embrace that in a self-aware manner and execute to this level with this kind of humor is, I can't say enough good things about it. Just delightful.
Now, I will say, and so, it seems like it did pretty well for the weekend. I mean, it's $34 million, which it doesn't sound like a lot for what you think of as big budget movie releases and things like that. But
yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out what the budget for the film was, but I doubt it was that much. I mean, in general, like this kind of
in the tens of millions, not the hundreds of millions.
Yeah. I mean, I would assume it was more than, it's probably in the 60-ish million range. It's hard to say, but it'll probably do fine. And I think it won the weekend, so to speak. So I think it's doing okay, but I mean, it's not a huge box office winner or anything, but at the same time, like, this genre is fairly affordable.
Yeah.
As far as this kind of thing.
This is not going to win any awards either. Let's be real with ourselves here. But it doesn't need to. It accomplishes its goals.
Okay.
And it's just fun to watch.
So let's shift gears for a second, though, because I want to talk about, so the Oscars just happened, right?
Yeah.
And we can go through the Oscar winners for this year, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Best Director, Jane Campion, Power of the Dog. Did you see that movie?
No, it seemed like the most boring piece of self-important cinema. I just had no interest in it. It didn't look fun.
Yeah. Best Picture, Coda. Did you see that movie?
No, I didn't.
It's a remake of a French film. It's European. I don't know. I'm trying to even think, like, if this is... I don't know anybody who saw that movie. Nobody. I don't remember anybody talking to me about that movie. Nobody told me to watch that movie. Nobody said. And this is in a category that now has 10 nominees, right?
Yeah.
Belfast, Don't Look Up, Drive My Car, Dune, King Richard, Licorice Pizza, Nightmare Alley, The Power of the Dog, and West Side Story all got beaten. And by the way, most of those fall into the same category for me. I really enjoyed Nightmare Alley. I enjoyed Dune. We've talked about Dune several times. I enjoyed Dune. I don't really understand why Spielberg felt the need to remake West Side Story. I hated Don't Look Up. Belfast is great, but very specific.
Yeah.
And black and white also.
Yeah.
I mean, Licorice Pizza's advertising just made me want to throw something at the screen every time I saw it. So I didn't go see it for that reason. Its trailers made me not want to see the movie. I might have seen it otherwise. King Richard is just about subject matter that I just don't care about in the slightest. Although Will Smith got awarded the Best Actor after punching Chris Rock in the face, so that's fun. I mean,
let's not get it twisted, Sean. He slapped him.
Oh, he did slap him. He didn't really punch him. He did. It was open fist. Definitely slap. I don't know. I mean, it's just weird to me. Like, looking at what the Oscars is doing.
It is,
I mean,
pretentious, self-congratulatory.
Yeah.
I'm trying to use words that are family friendly for this show, and I'm having difficulty. And then they wonder why the awards shows ratings keep tanking. No, and nobody watches the Oscars. I'm like, well, nobody watches the movies that get nominated for Oscars.
No,
that's why.
And it's funny, and it's not. And here's the thing: it's not necessarily because these films are worse, more poorly made films.
Mm-hmm.
In many cases, the films that everybody goes to see are incredibly well made. I mean, Dune won a lot of like technical Oscars for the most part. Like Dune won for best score, it won for best sound, it won for best cinematography,
best editing,
best editing. and best visual effects. That's a pretty big sweep for Dune.
Yeah.
But even that,
gorgeous
Dune was up against No Time to Die, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, Spider-Man No Way Home for best visual effects.
Yeah.
Is there really something worse about the visual effects of No Time to Die or Spider-Man, for example?
No, those were also
they're tremendous effects-driven films,
yeah.
and they're very, very good. My point is simply that like there's the Hollywood establishment is so wildly out of touch with what would be entertaining for audiences most of the time at this point. And it's kind of, I don't know, it gets to a point where I feel like it's almost shocking and sort of unforgivable to some extent, because like, again, a movie like The Lost City, and look, I'm not saying that The Lost City deserves to win a bunch of awards or whatever. Like a lot of people are probably going to find this to be a mediocre movie. They're not going to like it, whatever. Like this is like a lot of comedy. It's going to be very specific to your taste. It's also for me, and I think possibly for Jen as well. I don't want to speak for you, but like some of it just comes from the fact that like I grew up in an era where these kinds of movies happened a lot, and then they haven't for 15 years.
Yeah.
So it's been kind of cool.
There is some of that.
Like we probably grew up around the same time where Matthew McConaughey was known for this kind of thing, for like Fool's Gold or, Sahara. Right. And I have a soft spot for all those movies because they're ridiculous, fun adventure movies. They do not take themselves seriously. They do not they're just a fun way to sort of explore interesting like geography, basically, with beautiful people doing funny, entertaining things. That's pretty much their purpose. They don't try to preach at you. They don't try to tell you the world is ending. They don't try to. They're not trying to say something about the state of George W. Bush or Donald Trump or whatever. Like they're not trying to beat you over the head with anything but a good time. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Like that's something that I feel like it's the entertainment that our entertainment industry has been missing.
Exactly.
For a good long while.
The Oscars remind me like how much Hollywood has lost sight of what audiences actually want and what their jobs are. It's art, yes, but it's entertainment. And there's no reason why those two things can't exist in the same place. But sometimes you just want to watch pretty people have an adventure. And there's nothing wrong with that. It shouldn't be like looked down on or shamed.
Yeah.
And yet here we are.
I mean, I don't know if you do this. I have periods in my life where I go back and forth between, so like if I am like really heavily involved in creating nonfiction, for example, I've done documentaries and I've done lots of sort of and even like Out of Frame to some extent is like nonfiction in a way, but at least I get to talk about fictional stories a lot of the time. So I'm kind of engaging in that mode. But what I do is I sort of reverse what I consume based on what I create to some extent. So like if I'm doing more narrative stuff or if I'm involved in more things that are sort of, creative story driven, then I'll often consume a lot of nonfiction. I'll listen to a lot of podcasts and things like that, and that are, not about Hollywood or whatever. And then when it's the reverse, when I'm like really heavily like dealing with real stuff in my professional life, then I flip and I do a lot of fantasy stories and fiction, things like that. Cause like, I actually think people need, one way or another, you need the escape, right? Like you either like you are so involved in escapism in your career, you need something real, or you're so involved in real stuff that you need something not real. You need something fun to sort of take your mind off all that kind of thing.
That's probably why I read so many romance and fantasy novels.
Oh, I bet. Because why would you, if you're engaged in like, politics every day, or if you're engaged in like, real stuff all the time, you got to have something
Yeah.
to sort of take yourself away from that.
The very last thing I want to do in my copious free time is, consume more of that, more vitriol, more angst.
Oh, yeah.
More despair. That's not what I'm here for.
No, I agree. And so I think stuff like this to me is like kind of refreshing. It's not been around for a while.
Yeah.
And to be honest, Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum, for that matter, are some of the best that you could find to do it as well.
Yeah. And their chemistry on screen is outstanding. Apparently they're friends in real life. Their kids go to the same school. Like met.
So I guess that's the story,
kids were
right?
In trouble at the same time. They bonded.
Really, is that because they were both in trouble? I guess I heard the story that they met and decided to do this because their kids attend the same school or whatever. I didn't know that they were like in trouble. It's funny. They're both two parents who showed up for detention to pick their kids up after school.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. But I don't know. I think we can kind of wrap it up here, but I will say, if I can, look, if you're a younger kid, if you're in high school, whatever, this movie's probably not going to be your cup of tea. But if you're 35, you're probably gonna like this movie. You're
probably gonna like it a lot. Yeah.
And I will say, if nothing else, like I would suggest that you watch it just for the puns, because there's just from their initial premise on, there's a lot you can do with that, and a lot that they did do with that. So
I would also recommend watching it just to see a really well executed, very tight plot that is not boring and not rushed.
Yep. No. Yeah, me too. Let's do star ratings. I don't know if, since we don't have Paul, we'll just preemptively give Paul a rating of 1 star.
What full star from Paul?
Full star from Paul. Thanks, Paul. Huge fan. What would you do?
I'm also going to give this a full star, because this is going to get rewatched. This is going to be one of those movies that I go back when I just need something light and feel good and funny. And this is going to be it.
I go back and I don't know if people are going to shame me for this, but I go back and rewatch The Proposal every other year or so. Probably watch that movie, and it's just a sweet. It's a great romantic comedy, once again starring Sandra Bullock, and another one of the most impossibly handsome / funny people in the world, Ryan Reynolds. So, like, you can get it done. As we were saying earlier, I mean, if this movie had John Hamm in it, that'd be sort of the trifecta. I think at that point, but
for sure.
Yeah, full star for me. I could totally see rewatching this. It'd be an easy rewatch. If you're feeling tired, you feel like a little bit bummed out, be a pretty good one to do. And I kind of like, but we didn't talk about him at all, but like I kind of like that Daniel Radcliffe keeps doing like weirdo,
I'm here for it, honestly. I'm really feeling the weirdo Daniel Radcliffe.
His choices are really strange now, and I kind of love it. And this one is like he is basically, his entire motivation is that he is a trust fund baby, essentially, whose dad gave the empire to his younger brother, and he is very upset about that.
Oh yeah.
And
he's big mad.
He's big mad, and he wanted to go find something that his younger brother would never have, because it's something that nobody has. And so he was looking for the treasure that came along with finding this tomb or whatever. And yeah, he's just very upset that his brother got something he didn't get.
Oh my gosh.
Which is great. I'd also like to meet his brother. You find out that his brother is actually really competent and smart and like a great guy. Whatever.
That I would be definitely here for that. I would have liked to have seen a post-credit scene of the little brother just being the best.
Yeah. No. But full star for me. I enjoyed this. I thought it was a good time. Set your expectations and just go for fun. That's what I would say. So anyway, thank you so much for listening to this show. If you are a fan of Out of Frame, please be sure to give this podcast a review and a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Google Play, wherever you're listening. Like, the ratings actually really help. It's really great to share with your friends and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, check us out there. Check us out on all the social media. We're all over the place, and you can find some of those links probably in the description wherever you found this podcast. So please check out all of that kind of stuff. Thank you for giving us your time. We will see you next time.